Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 6 in our DuFour textbook, which is going to look at the ongoing monitoring of student learning. This chapter is going to be very interesting because it's going to look at what a professional learning community can do to realize student learning. It's this notion that if you're doing it correctly, everybody understands that there's some form of assessment taking place, and it's going to transition into this chapter that goes over a new form of report cards. I'm presenting this information full well knowing that none of us are going to be able to change our report card systems in our district, but it's a good way to look at it, and it's a potential reform that's presented. I do agree that we rely heavily on standardized testing data, and it doesn't show how students arrived at goals, so this other assessment is there to kind of help with it. So when teachers work independently or in groups and they're told you need to design an assessment for A, B, or C, what a teacher tends to do, and whether you think this is right or wrong, it's truthfully just what a teacher does. A teacher is going to design a classroom assessment that covers multiple topics and multiple objectives. DuFour's big argument throughout this entire, I would say, section is that when you do that, it takes away kind of the fidelity on what those assessments represent. And if the student missed one objective, there's zero guarantees that the student understood why they missed the objective, because they could have been confused by another one, could have been applying something differently. So we try to find ways that our assessments are looking for one particular objective, and that's why if assessment is ongoing, it's easier. So there's a theory and there's a term from John Hattie. It's called Unidimensionality, and I think this is worth you looking at, especially as doc students. Once again, this might be an area that you want to research and look at if you're interested in assessment. Test theory has meaning only if items are attributed to one particular dimension, meaning that if the students are only getting one thing out of their tests, that means that it has meanings. When you have multiple objectives and multiple measures, there is no guarantee that a student actually learned what they were supposed to learn. If you have these types of assessments, students are never going to get the feedback that they need. Because of that, Marzano and DuFour take that principle and they say, we're going to design a new way to design assessments and score assessments. We're going to score assessments in conjunction only with specific objectives, and they give you a good sample that's presented in our textbook. It's on pages 125 to 128. I would encourage you to visit it. It's time consuming, but it's something to take a look at. Before we go any further, think about right now, because like I had indicated to you, I would have used collateral damage for this class. I would have used that book. I love that book. It really goes over this overuse of testing. If every assessment had one objective only that it was looking at, would we be over testing? What would that look like? So think about that and determine if that would have been an intended consequence of it. So tests with multiple dimensions. DuFour and Marzano say really only one dimension, only one thing that a test should be doing. But once again, is that feasible with the time that takes place in the school day, with the number of mandates that you're responsible for? You would have to divide the tests up. You would have to say that each question is its own objective, and we're going to just test on one objective at a time, and we're not going to overlap the learning objectives. Yeah, this is a great idea, but this is going to take a ton of time for all of you, and if there's a certain amount of standards that the students have to meet, that's going to make it more challenging. So there's other types of assessments that can be used that are the opposite of standardized assessments. I think some of these are really good ideas and they're worth visiting. They use that proficiency scale model that was on pages 125 to 128, so if you're curious, go visit it. If not, think of the assessments in terms of the way that they can really be used for student proficiency. So probing discussions, I love this idea, but remember I'm coming from this early childhood background, so of course I see significant value in probing discussions is a potential assessment tool. Basically what happens is the teacher meets one-on-one with the student and says, we're going to explain specific information, demonstrate skills, and the teacher asks questions. The teacher will ask probing questions that clarifies what the students know and what the students doesn't know, and then the teacher assesses how well they fared on those questions. if you're doing this correctly and you're good at having a discussion with a student, you can progressively make the questions harder. Make them dig, make them see what they're capable of doing. If you're doing single-digit addition, you only do single-digit addition up to 9. Then you add in single-digit addition up to 18. Then you add, two digits plus 1 digit. Then you could possibly go 2 plus 2, 3 plus 2, and you keep building it, and you see what the student knows, and you do it in discussion form, and you let them demonstrate. You'll find where their stopping point is if you do this. So once again, also another early childhood education concept. This is one of the reasons why I kind of like this stuff. This is this idea of naturalistic observation. I think this is awesome. You basically just sit back, notice when a student is doing something correctly and rate their expertise on it. And if you notice that they aren't doing something, you kind of sit back and then you make a note and you visit it later. The students don't know they're being assessed, and then you can use it as a big topic that you talk about in class. I think this is unique, but once again, I guess I get jaded sometimes. You really couldn't design a classroom where this is all that you're doing, but our author suggests this notion and this concept of a student-generated assessment, which I think is a great idea in theory, but what would that look like in execution form? The student tells the teacher, this is what I'd like to do, and I want to use this to show that I have mastered A, B, and C. The teacher assesses them, and the student demonstrates using the skill that they expect to demonstrate and what they thought they would know. Once again, I think this is a great idea, but ask yourself, how much time would this take? If the students generated all their assessments, would it be fair? How would you make sure that you could compare one student to another if you had to do that? So this is a good idea, but I think this is very time consuming, but it's something that could work. So SMART goals, we spoke about at the beginning of this course on the first lecture video that you watched even before I met with you guys. We said this is knowing that we set percentiles and we have a plan for what the students know and for what the students should be able to accomplish. So for instance, if I said 86% of the grade had passing grades, I want it to be 93%. I take a proficiency scale then and I say, what would 87% look like? What would 88% look like? What would 89% look like? And that's considered to be a SMART goal in education. And it can be adapted using that proficiency scale. So common assessments, I want you, when you hear common assessments, I want you to think benchmark in your mind. You as the professional learning community can align the test on the questions on the test to specific objectives. And then you can see which objectives need more refinement. But when you're doing that, remember the other things that our authors caution against, and it's this idea that we don't want to overdo it and give them way too many objectives that they have to meet. So everything that our authors suggest is that we don't give A, B's, and C's, and we give them a 4.0 scale like they're going to be used to in college. Instead of getting 100% on something, we give them a 4.0. Instead of giving them a 95, we give them a 3.5, all the way down to a 0% to a 0.0. You would have to determine the proficiency scale, you would have to rate it, and you would have to change it. Any way you look at it, it's still something that would probably be difficult to explain to parents, and it would have to be embedded in the school culture. So this textbook says, well, now that we've done this, we're going to show you what the ideal and what the dream report card would look like. I want you to look at it. I don't see many districts buying into this, because honestly, if we assessed K-12 like college, this is what it would look like. So take a look at the model. You don't have to buy into it, but kind of see what it would look like if we did exactly that and we assessed K-12 like college. So the authors believe in it. I think it's highly unrealistic to be done in our system, but maybe in a charter school this would work. Maybe it's something that you would be able to see, and it's something that you would be able to use. Could the college model transfer to K-12? I don't know. So the next chapter is also abstract. It's going to go over lesson studies. I'm going to give you big ideas of it. You can read and visit the book on your own, and you can look at it for your own interpretation. If there's anything I can do to help, as always, let me know. This concept was one that I wanted you to get a little bit of exposure to, kind of see what it looked like, and if it's something you want to use, go for it. If not, there's no reason not to just at least consider it. Thank you very much.